A wise person basically chooses the right kind of disciplines in his life and basically subjects his life and his body to those disciplines so that they live a wise and prosperous life, something that honors God and is focused on God. So we're going to see those basic five elements outlined and discussed in as we continue to look at the Proverbs of Solomon, beginning with chapter 12, verse 1, wherein Solomon says, "Whoever loves discipline loves knowledge, the right kind of knowledge in terms of how to live life. But he who hates correction is," look at this word, "stupid." He doesn't mince words. If you refuse to be corrected, if you will not, if you refuse to do the right thing, you are a stupid kind of person. And it's hard to argue with that conclusion when it's there's so much stupid behavior that doesn't need to be out there. Verse 2, a good man obtains favor from the Lord, but the Lord condemns a man who devises wicked schemes. Um, this kind of grows out of the law that was laid down that came from Moses in Deuteronomy chapter 27 and 28. Go back and read that sometime. You'll see that basically Moses reads out and the people recite a list of blessings that will come to the Israelites when they obey the Lord. And then conversely, there is a whole laundry list of curses that will fall on the Israelites if they disobey the Lord. And you sometimes when you're dealing with someone and you tell them what they need to do, you basically say, "I need to hear you say that," because if you say it, it impresses. It really makes a greater impression on the brain. And basically, this was the hope. This was the intent of what the Lord wanted the Israelites to do. Not only just listen to His word and His expectations, but say them and do more than just say them, live them. Verse 3, a man cannot be established through wickedness, but the righteous cannot be uprooted. A wife of noble character, a wife who is excellent, is her husband's crown. This verse here is kind of a follow-up, kind of a positive and a negative follow-up to what we saw in the previous chapter, verse 27, where, like a gold ring and a pig's snout is someone who is a wife who has absolutely no taste or no discernment. He says here, a disgraceful wife is like decay in a husband's bones. And this basically tells you, regardless of whether you are a man or a woman, if you're contemplating marriage, choose your marriage partner carefully. Your partner can be the best thing in your life, or that person can really, if not, they may not ruin or destroy your life, but they can really add a lot of pain, a lot of grief, and a lot of distraction that could be avoided. Verse 5, the plans of the righteous are just, but the advice of the wicked is deceitful. The words of the wicked are, let's lie in wait for blood. Kind of throws back to chapter 1, where wisdom was warning about the fact, young man, don't listen to someone who says, here's the path to easy money. Let's lie in wait for some poor soul and waylay them and rob them and maybe even kill them. You can do that physically. You can also attack someone through your words. So avoid be careful when you listen to the words of the wicked, but the speech of the upright rescues them. If you're speaking honestly and truthfully, there's really hardly any situation where you need to be afraid of what you're saying. The wicked are overthrown and are no more, but the house of the righteous stands firm. A man is praised according to his wisdom, according to his prudence. What is prudence? Well, that's Prudence is where you take that knowledge and you take that wisdom that you've applied. It's all up into your head. Prudence is where the rubber meets the road. You go and apply what you've learned to your everyday life. And if you apply wisdom to your life, you are being prudent. But one with a warped mind, with a perverse heart, is despised. Verse 9, kind of interesting because it can be interpreted two ways. Solomon writes here, and I'm reading from the NIV here, better to be a nobody and yet have a servant than pretend to be somebody and have no food. It's it's kind of an interesting comment here. And we probably all know or have run into someone who basically tried to pretend to be something more than what they really were. And sometimes, if you really get into that kind of head game, it can get to the point where you're willing to do it to the point where you basically stop taking care of the basic needs of your life. That's one way of reading or interpreting the verse 9 here. There's another interpretation that has to do with your status in life. The Revised Standard Version translates this verse as, better is a man of humble standing who works for himself than one who plays the great man but lacks bread. You can have a humble status in life. Basically, you can be Mr. Joe Average. I almost said Mr. Joe Sixpack, but I don't know all that many people who are into beer. But Mr. Joe Average can be really better off than someone who is regarded as one of the most prominent, powerful, richest, most prosperous people in the neighborhood or in the city. Even if you're not as wealthy as the guy next to you, you can be in a better situation if you've got everything you need, as Solomon says, even to the point where you actually have someone to take care of some of your household needs. You got a basic servant, or you can job stuff out. It's this kind of interpretation, this kind of verse, if it interpreted that way, can apply to somebody who's not only the average person in the community, but someone to the point where they've been slighted, or they tend to be overlooked. They're even insulted. They're dissed. People throw shade on them, and basically talk trash about them. Ultimately, it doesn't really matter what other people say that counts. It's obviously the relationship you have with God and what God thinks of you that ultimately will take care of you. And the bottom line of this is you can eat bread, but you can't eat honor. So there's past a certain point, there's just nothing to be gained by pretending you're a man of standing when you really have nothing to stand on. Verse 10, the righteous man cares for the needs of his animals, but the kindest acts, the tender mercies of the wicked are cruel. Interesting verse. The righteous care for the needs of their animals, just as God cares for all the animals. Go back and read Psalm 104. That says that all these animals look to God for their food at the proper time. And essentially, anyone, a God-fearing person cares for those who care for him. That could be someone who works with you. It could be a member of the family. It could be that servant that Solomon referred to just a verse earlier. But if someone is helping you out, even if it's the family pet, you get a lot of care, a lot of love, a lot of benefits out of that family pet. It's instinctive, or it should be instinctive, to care for anyone who provides a service for you or loves you in turn. and a righteous person will do that. Conversely, the kindest acts of the wicked are cruel. Whatever a wicked person will do for another person is almost always done out of that person's own self-interest. It's basically part of exploiting them, is what Solomon's saying. Verse 11, he who works his land will be satisfied with bread. He'll have abundant food, but he who chases frivolity, he who goes off and does something else other than planting and sowing and harvesting the land that is in the family has absolutely no sense at all. This kind of goes back to what Solomon said earlier. Go to the ant, you sluggard. If you want to know really how to live a useful life, go observe the ant and what they're doing. They're gathering food. They're planning for the future, even though they don't have a brain. Verse 12, the wicked covet or desire the plunder of evildoers, but the root of the righteous endures. It yields fruit. Verse 13, I like this one. Evildoers are trapped by their sinful talk, by the transgression of their lips. And so the righteous, the innocent, will escape trouble. Basically, I think what Solomon's saying here, if you're prone to lying, if you're prone to saying whatever you wanted to say to try to exploit someone, basically get on somebody's right side so you can take advantage of them, it's going to come back on you. Transgression of a wicked person's lips, lies, false promises, making assurances that you have no intention of keeping. As we mentioned earlier, trash talking. I'm reminded of something that Sam Rayburn said one time. For those of you who may not remember who Sam Rayburn was, he was a very powerful politician, Speaker of the House. He was the mentor to Lyndon Johnson. Sam Rayburn was notorious for being notoriously honest. He would, have him talk to 40 different people in one day. He wouldn't say 40 different versions of the same thing. He would say the same thing to everybody. And he explained why he was so brutally honest sometimes. He said, if I'm honest with everybody, I don't have to remember what I said to that person the last time. That's one way how your lies catch up with you, because you accidentally tell the truth at the wrong time. And boy, are you in trouble. The innocent escape trouble. They'll come through. Jesus said, and he assured his disciples in the Gospel of John, he said, you will have tribulation. Yes, you'll have trouble in your life, but be of good cheer. I've overcome the world. Yes, we're not guaranteed or assured of escaping trouble, but when trouble happens, God will provide a way of escape. Verse 14, from the fruit of their lips, people are filled with good things, and the fruit of their hands brings them reward. We will receive what we've worked for, good or bad. It's basically how things work out in this life. And that's long term, that's what will occur in our lives. What we have worked for, if we have worked for in a God-fearing way, God will honor that. Whatever people have done sinfully, dishonestly, eventually it comes back on their head. And even if they don't get the full measure of it, even if we don't get the full measure of the good that we've done, keep in mind, life is more than just what's here on earth. There's our material life here, and then there's our eternal life with God. Verse 15, the way of fools seems right to him, but the wise man listens to advice. The fool is never wrong. He never needs correction because he knows he's right, or at least he doesn't care about being wrong, or he has the kind of personality that is just not going to tolerate any kind of correction, any kind of advice, no matter how it's offered. Fools show their annoyance at once. There's absolutely no self-control. If they're provoked for any reason, they give in to their anger. But the prudent man overlooks an insult. They're the type that basically, if they are insulted, if they're angry, if they get angry, they follow the advice of count to 10 before you say or do anything. That works a lot. If you're still angry, there's another recommendation, and this came from President Lincoln. This is one thing Abe Lincoln was fond of doing whenever he was intensely upset with someone, and generally it was one of his political colleagues. He really wanted to rat them out and maybe even wring their neck or whatever. So he would sit down, write a letter, just tell them what a terrible person they were, and he hoped this stuff happened to him, and this stuff would happen to him, and just basically just page after page of, anger and malice and gee, I hope you die, and then I hope you really start having trouble, that kind of stuff. He would sign it, Abe Lincoln. He wouldn't mail it. He'd stick it in his desk drawer, let it sit, maybe one day, maybe 2 days. A couple of days later, he'd open it up, get that letter out, read it, laugh, tear it up, and throw it away. Basically, that's the way to handle anger. You do it in a way where you don't wind up saying and doing things that can really damage and do real damage to a relationship. Verse 17, an honest man tells the truth, but a false witness tells lies. Yeah, speaks for itself. The words of the reckless pierce like swords, but the tongue of the wise brings healing. There are folks who, I'm just laying it on you, man. I'm telling you the truth. And they use telling the truth as an excuse for just basically speaking without any kind of judgment at all. They'll say a lot of things, they'll use a lot of language that basically doesn't help the situation, but it does a lot to damage the relationship. The tongue of the wise, basically language, when the wise person, especially if they have to deal with a troublesome situation, they know how to address that person, address the situation with words seasoned with grace. They understand that the goal here is to resolve a bad situation, not to make it worse, not to make the other person angry. Truthful lips endure forever, but a lying tongue lasts only a moment. Deceit is in the hearts of those who plot evil, but counselors who promote peace have joy. Interesting. Whenever Proverbs talks about counseling or counselors, they always talk about counselors in the plural as a group, with the idea that it's not a bad idea to talk to more than one person. Get as much of a perspective as you can. Verse 21 sounds like basically a rinse and repeat of verse 13. No grave trouble, no harm overtakes the righteous, but the wicked will have their fill of trouble. Lying lips are an abomination to the Lord, but he delights in those who deal truthfully. The prudent man keeps his knowledge to himself, but a fool's heart blurts out folly. I bet you know at least one person, or you've encountered one person in your life who just cannot keep a secret. And they're just blabbermouths. There's something about, hey, I know something you don't know, so they have to go tell that person. And they just blabber it out. Maybe they add a few details that aren't actually there. Yeah, you know that kind of person. Prudent man, he may know all the secrets in the world, but he doesn't let them out, or if he discusses to the degree that he has to discuss them, he doesn't let out any more knowledge than he has to. Especially if that certain knowledge or certain information could harm other people. Verse 24, diligent hands will rule, but laziness ends in forced labor. Basically, If you are a hard, honest worker, people are going to notice that. God will bless it. People will notice it. More often than not, you will be promoted and blessed because of good, honest work. The lazy person, basically, yeah, he's going to wind up working for other people because he just really can't even control his own life. Anxiety weighs down the heart, but a kind word cheers it up. Yeah. What do you do with anxiety? Well, Paul wrote in Philippians chapter 4, verse 6, he said, be anxious for nothing, but bring all your concerns to God. Pray about everything. Test. Test. Uh-oh. Yes. That, that's right. Gee, that was my moment to lie and to speak disrespectfully and to tell things that I either didn't know or other people didn't know. But now we're back on audio, so I have to watch myself. Doggone it. Verse 27. This may be another little joke from Solomon. You can almost hear him chuckling as he writes it down. The lazy man does not roast what he took in hunting, but the diligent man feeds on the riches of the hunt. What's that little joke? Solomon's saying, there is a point where you are so lazy that you don't push through, you don't finish what you've begun. And that can be pretty foolish. I mean, it's a waste of time, it's a waste of money, it's a waste of resources. Especially if someone was counting on you to do that. The lazy don't roast the game, what they took in hunting. Basically, what's the point in going hunting if you don't take care of the game that you've shot or bagged or whatever? The whole point of hunting, more often than not, almost always is, hey, I want some different kind of food on the table. What point is it to just basically, hey, I shot this turkey, I shot this deer. Well, what'd you do with it? Well, I kind of left it out in the field. I'll get around to it sometime. Waste, total waste. So, finish what you've started. Verse 28, in the way of righteousness there is life. Along that path is immortality. For now, and not just for now in this life, but for eternity as well. We're now in chapter 13. A wise son heeds his father's instruction, but a mocker does not listen to rebukes. And once again, just as a reminder, this is a classical way of teaching back in Hebrew culture back in the day. You did this contrasting. You had activity A, and then you contrasted it with, more often than not, with the opposite in the next line. And basically, you're trying to show off what is good and what is to be avoided. A wise son listens to instruction. A mocker does not listen. He won't respond even to rebukes. That's a stronger word than instruction. Basically, a mocker, to deal with a mocker, you have to go past mere instruction. You have to start scolding them. What did I tell you? Well, I don't care, man. Of course, long term, that's going to hurt the person who refuses instruction. From the fruit of their lips, people enjoy good things. A man shall eat well by the fruit of his mouth. The unfaithful feeds on an appetite for violence. The wise person is blessed by his wise and good speech. An unfaithful person basically generates violence in one form or another, either verbal violence, sometimes violent words can lead to violent actions, unfortunately. Here's a related thought in verse 3. He who guards his mouth preserves his life, but he who opens wide his lips, he who speaks rashly, will come to ruin. There's an Arab proverb that says, take heed that your tongue does not cut your throat. That's kind of out there, but that kind of gets the point across. Verse 4, the sluggard's appetite is never filled. The soul of a lazy man desires and has nothing. It's not that a lazy man has no desire at all. Yeah, they have desires, they have wants just like anyone else. They just don't have the initiative to go out there and accomplish what they want. The desires of the diligent are fully satisfied. The righteous man hates what is false. The righteous man hates to lie. They literally hate lying. That may be why a lot of Christians, a lot of Christian friends that you know, make such lousy liars. Yeah, I can't believe I'm saying what I'm saying, and they start to break down. They trip themselves up. It's not a really good thing to be an accomplished liar, to be a convincing liar. That says more about you and your personality and your character than whatever else you may be telling them. So the righteous hate to lie, but the wicked man is loathsome. He makes himself a stench. He brings shame upon himself. Righteousness guards the person of integrity, but wickedness overthrows the sinner. And interesting, what's translated here as the sinner in the original Hebrew is literally the man of sin. We all sin. So, we're all sinners in the generic sense. What Solomon is pointing to is someone who just has embraced a life of sin. He is totally okay going down that path 24/7. He's given himself over to evil. So, at some point, what that person thinks he's in charge of or is controlling will wind up controlling him. Here's another pretense proverb, verse 7. One person pretends to be rich, yet has nothing. Another pretends to be poor, yet has great wealth. Again, Solomon may be pointing out someone who is making a pretense of what a wonderful life they have, which they don't. That's one interpretation. Interesting, the original King James, or in the King James Version, this is translated as one person makes himself rich, another makes himself poor, which may actually, if you read that literally, you may be talking about something in terms of pretense, but you may past pretending to be something to, this is how I'm living my life. I'm a rich man who is giving or devoting my resources to help others, even if it does make me poor, even to the point of being poor. And, making yourself poor by enriching others, seeking their welfare. Gee, do we have a good example for that? That would be Jesus. And Paul said in Philippians, go back and read Philippians chapter 2, verses 5 through 11, who made himself nothing. He didn't consider giving up that relationship with God in heaven, something to hang on to at all costs, but he made himself nothing, came to earth as a human, lived among us, taught us, conducted his ministry, gave his life literally on the cross. And Paul also in 2 Corinthians chapter 8 talks about Jesus. He said, though Jesus was rich, considering where he was before he began his earthly ministry, yet for your sakes he became poor that you, through his poverty, might become rich. So, that this is another way of reading or interpreting this proverb here, that someone who makes himself poor, devotes himself poor to following God's will, makes himself or incurs great wealth, or will incur great wealth spiritually. Verse 8 also talks about wealth, but in a different way. He says, a man's riches may, or a rich man's life may ransom his life, but the poor man does not hear threatening rebukes. There is wealth can be great, but wealth presents its own problems, uh, especially with people who at some point will want to try to take some of that wealth away from them. That can be a problem. What Solomon may be saying is that, hey, if you are poor, or as society talks poor, or as your expectations are of being poor, you may not have millions of dollars, but that may be a blessing because you don't have to go through the kind of problems or deal with the kind of problems that an extremely wealthy person does. So wealth can bring its own troubles. Verse 9, the light of the righteous shines brightly, but the lamp of the wicked will be snuffed out, very likely by God's judgment. Verse 10, where there's strife, there's pride, but wisdom is found in those who are well advised. Basically, don't live a prideful life. That's just inviting all sorts of trouble. Dishonest money, wealth gained by dishonesty, dwindles away, basically because it doesn't have God's blessing. But whoever gathers money little by little makes it grow. Basically, honest labor, someone who prudently sets aside money will become wealthy, or will have the kind of wealth that you don't have to worry about losing. Hope deferred makes the heart sick, but a longing fulfilled is a tree of life. Whoever scorns instruction, whoever despises the word of wisdom, will pay for it. They'll be destroyed. But whoever respects the command is rewarded. Something to think about if you're in your Bible study, if you feel like there is a directive or God is telling you to do something, take that word seriously. The law of the wise, the teaching of the wise, is a fountain of life, turning a man from the snares of death. I love that fountain of life. That probably in that day and age, in that very, very dry atmosphere, in that desert compound where every drop of water counted, a fountain of life. You can just, what's a fountain? Well, basically you see the water overflowing and just gushing out. Kind of reminds the discussion that Jesus had with the Samaritan woman at the well in John chapter 4. Whoever, if you dipped your cup in this well to drink, you'll be thirsty again, but whoever takes my water will never be thirsty again. Verse 15, good judgment, good understanding wins favor from God and people, but the way of the unfaithful leads to their destruction. Supposedly John Wayne once said to somebody, he said, life is hard. It's harder when you're stupid. So, if, food for thought, something to think about. Verse 16, every prudent man acts with knowledge, but fools expose their folly for all the world to see. It's sometimes when some elaborate criminal, basically their little enterprise crashes and burns, what happens? It shows up on the TV news or in the morning paper, and especially if it's someone who is prominent in the community. Oh man, when you read those kind of stories, you almost feel sorry for that individual because of what they're going through. But foolish behavior, sinful behavior, more often than not will come back to bite you. A wicked messenger falls into trouble. A wicked messenger. Well, that may be you know a messenger who could be developed in that day and age, delivering the message of a wicked man, which puts them in a bad situation where he's saying, "Hey, don't shoot me. I'm only telling you what the guy said." Um, Look at the next line. A trustworthy envoy, a faithful ambassador brings healing, brings health. Someone who is an ambassador and who is a trained ambassador. And this eventually that you could, a wise person you can think of as an ambassador because they've learned how to speak basically tactfully. They don't blurt out everything. They don't speak bluntly. Their words are seasoned with grace, and they think before they speak. That kind of person is the kind of person whose speech can actually heal over a bad situation and come to a happy ending. Verse 18. Whoever disregards discipline, who disdains correction, comes to poverty and shame, basically because they never learn from their mistakes. But whoever heeds correction, regards a rebuke, that person is honored. Verse 19 looks like a rinse and repeat of verse 12. A longing fulfilled, a desire that is accomplished is sweet to the soul, but fools detest turning from evil. The original language basically says, for the evil person, it's an abomination to turn from evil. They absolutely hate doing something that's good. Ouch. Verse 20. Walk with the wise and become wise, but a companion of fools suffers harm. He will be destroyed. These show clear opposite outcomes of walking with wisdom, basically being the company of wise people, or running with the company of foolish people. It's like the guy who said, tell me your friends, show me your friends, and I'll show you your future. Verse 21, evil pursues the sinner, but the righteous are rewarded with good things. Just like Paul said in Galatians chapter 6, verse 7, you reap what you sow. So be careful. A good man leaves an inheritance for their children's children. That's material and spiritual. That reminds me what David wrote in Psalm 37. He said, I was young, and now I'm old, but I have never seen the righteous man go starving or his children likewise. One of the blessings of a righteous man is that righteousness, the blessings of the righteous person basically overflow to their children and sometimes to the grandchildren as well. So that's what's in store for a good man and his family, but a sinner's wealth is stored up for the righteous. That ill-gained wealth will wind up eventually going somewhere else. Here's a curious proverb. An unplowed field produces food for the poor, but injustice sweeps it away. Another translation, much food is in the grounds of the poor, and for lack of justice there is waste. This is another verse that looks like, first blush, Solomon is chastising the poor, and a casual reading, a lazy reading of this, you might come away with, oh, if you're poor, then you're a foolish, sinful person. Not necessarily. He's not laying blame here necessarily to poor people. What he may be saying is that often the poor are deprived of what they deserve because of unjust people and actions. They're not able to get what they need because the economics, the odds are against them, or there are powerful people against them. Kind of reminds you of the parable of the widow and the judge that Jesus talks about in Luke, where the widow basically, in order to get what she needs, because she knows she's not going to be able to get it on her own terms. She has to badger this wicked judge into looking out for her cause. Verse 24, he who spares the rod hates his son, but he who loves his children is careful to discipline them. Again, this is a proverb that should be read carefully. This is not an endorsement of child abuse. It's basically what it's saying is the refusal to discipline your children at all is going to lead to all sorts of consequences that will hurt them down the road. So yes, should you, as a Christian father or mother, discipline your children when it's called for? Absolutely. But no undue severity. You don't overdo it. Paul warns against that in Ephesians chapter 6, verse 4. And that punishment should be prompt to connect the punishment with the misbehavior. So proper punishment, proper discipline, and do it promptly. And then the final proverb in chapter 13, the righteous eat to their heart's content till their souls are satisfied, but the stomach of the wicked goes hungry. You can read that and interpret it physically and also spiritually. So that brings us to the end of chapter 13 and our lesson for this morning. Next week, we'll look at the next two chapters, chapters 14 and 15. If you will, read over those proverbs and be thinking about them. And that'll be our lesson for next Sunday. Thank you all for spending your time with us today. If you will, keep praying for rain because we really do need it. So, and the Lord will deliver it in His own good time. But let's keep praying for it. Have a great week, and Lord willing, we'll see you all next Sunday.